Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and as of right now I'm currently recovering with the symptoms of a horrible flu I had. But Super Jayain actually wanted me to upload a video on his behalf in terms of ranking all of the Majin Buus in terms of power, and personally I did this video quite a while back, and I think that Super Jayain has a much more modern perspective of how I feel of the subject, so I hope you guys enjoy this video.
Hello fellow Dragon Ball fans, Super Jayain here coming at you from Space Australia. Today I will be ranking the different forms of Majin Buu from weakest to strongest, and to do so I will be using the manga to basically prove my points in the video, because the manga gives much more consistent evidence than the anime. The anime can be very inconsistent at times, and it makes the whole debate very confusing. I'm looking to clear that up for you guys today. Now I have used pages of kissmanga.com. Some of the translations aren't accurate, so I have cross-referenced and cross-checked them with my manga collection behind me. So any manga pages I put up are pretty much accurate and do give correct statements. But guys, without wasting any more time, let's get into today's video. So obviously, to get the list started today, coming in at the weakest form of Majin Buu is Fat Buu, but it's for different reasons than what the fandom often believes. A lot of people believe that Fat Buu is the weakest because when Daikaioshin was absorbed, he weakened Majin Buu, and that's simply not the case. If you read the manga translations, basically the story behind it is the original Kid Buu is pure evil. He couldn't be controlled by Babbidy's father, and would just go on a rampage and do what he wanted to. Eventually, when he got around to absorbing Daikaioshin, he basically was given a soul and his behavior was changed. Now, the reason he would be considered weaker amongst the fandom is because he obviously goes up against weaker opponents. He has basically a fight with Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta, who he defeats in the end. Goku states that he could beat Majin Buu in his Super Saiyan 3 form. So whilst it is true that this form of Buu is weaker than other forms of Buu, it's not necessarily just because he absorbed Daikaioshin. It's because Daikaioshin is holding back Buu's true power. So Buu can't really use his latent power when Daikaioshin is absorbed into his being. And there's evidence here because Majin Buu's behavior slowly changes when he meets Mr. Satan, and ultimately he gets to a point where it's an ultimatum. He spits out the evil Grey Buu, they get into a fight and he is beaten by that Grey Buu, then Super Buu is born, and obviously that Grey Buu and Super Buu are stronger than evil Buu. And eventually the series gets around to making Kid Buu again at the end of the arc. But that is not necessarily why Fat Buu is the weakest form. He's the weakest form because he is being held back. He can't use his full potential because of the influence of Daikaioshin. Now, a lot of people might disagree with that, but that's pretty much exactly what it says in the manga. Not that Daikaioshin made him weaker, but he made him easier to control. Let's get on to the next pick. So the next weakest form of Majin Buu is the evil Buu that Fat Buu spits out. Now, Majin Buu, or Fat Buu, reaches a bit of an impasse. He has almost a bit of an identity crisis. He spits out evil Buu. They have a very short-lived fight, but it's clear that evil Buu has the advantage. And when Fat Buu tries to use his chocolate or candy beam on evil Buu sends it straight back at Fat Buu, thus turning him into chocolate. So the thing there is, it's quite obvious that evil Buu is stronger, and this really goes back to what I said earlier about Kid Buu being pure evil. This was an evil version of Buu, had more power at his disposal, wasn't being limited by the Daikaioshin, and that's why he was so easily able to beat Fat Buu. So let's get on to the next choice. Now, next up on the list we have Kid Buu. A lot of you are going to be saying, hang on a second, Kid Buu, why is he next? Well, let me explain. The manga does make it quite clear that Kid Buu is weaker than every iteration of Super Buu, including base Super Buu. Goku does fight somewhat evenly, if not evenly, with Kid Buu in his Super Saiyan 3 form, and it's basically his stamina drawbacks that end up losing the fight for him. If you rewind to when they were inside Super Buu's head and they had just freed the People Pods, Goku suggests to Vegeta that they do fusion because he thinks that they will die should they go out in their base forms. That it pretty much to me implies that if Goku is saying that he doesn't think he can beat Super Buu with his Super Saiyan 3 transformation, and that to me says that Kid Buu is obviously weaker than Super Buu. Now Kid Buu is one of those characters, he is pure evil, wreaking havoc throughout the universe when he's first created by Bibbidi, and then he starts absorbing the Kais. He does absorb the South Kaioshin or Kaioshin of the South, whatever you want to call him, and this does make him stronger. So the buff version of Buu basically that you see later in the series is stronger than Kid Buu as well. It's not until he absorbs Dai Kaioshin, as I mentioned earlier, it puts a cap on his power. So Kid Buu is stronger than those two forms of Majin Buu, but weaker than every iteration of Super Buu. So in next place we obviously have Super Buu. As I stated earlier, I believe Super Buu is stronger than Kid Buu because the only two characters in the manga that are stated to be able to beat Super Buu is possibly Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks and Ultimate Gohan for a fact. So Goku never states that he could beat Super Buu and says quite the opposite inside Super Buu's head after they have released the so-called People Pods. He says that Vegeta and himself should fuse before they leave, otherwise he thinks they will die. He doesn't think they'll be able to beat Super Buu as is, which implies Goku's Super Saiyan 3 form is no match for base Super Buu, thus placing Super Buu above the Kid Buu that he's fighting on, the world of the Kais. So the next two choices for my list are somewhat ambiguous and hard to place, but I'm looking from it at a very logical point of view. Next I have placed Buu, or Super Buu, with the South Kaioshin absorbed. Now this is the buff looking version of Buu that you see in his transition from Super Buu to Kid Buu. Now Vegeta and Goku do make a statement or comment saying that this guy is getting stronger, why is he getting stronger? I believe they're referring to Super Buu, who they've just fought inside Majin Buu's head, so bear with me, it gets a little bit confusing. But basically, there's no realistic chance that they would be referring to Super Buu with Gotenks absorbed or Super Buu with Gohan absorbed. It's just not a logical statement. They would obviously be referring to the Super Buu that they had just fought, and this form, for some reason, is making him stronger. Now, I place this below Buuikalo, as everyone likes to call him. Super Buu with the fusion, or absorption, I should say, of Piccolo, Goten, and Trunks, because he would also still have the South Kaioshin somewhere in his being. It's just the way it works, because for him to be making this transition into a buff-looking form from Super Buu to Kid Buu, South Kaioshin is obviously in his body somewhere or still affecting his being, otherwise that form wouldn't be seen. So even though you never see South Kaioshin get pulled out of a People Pod, it still makes sense for him to be a part of Super Buu when Piccolo, Goten, and Trunks are a part of his being. So that would mean that this form would be weaker because he wouldn't have the added power of Piccolo, of Goten, and of Trunks. And that is why I place this form below the so-called Buuikalo form, as the fandom likes to call it. So the next choice obviously is Buuikalo, as the fandom likes to call him, even though that's not an accurate name, because we have to remember that it's also Piccolo, Goten, and Trunks that are absorbed, not just Piccolo. And that is really why I place this form above Super Buu with just the South Kaioshin absorbed, because this form would theoretically have the South Kaioshin absorbed plus Piccolo, Goten, and Trunks in their unfused states, just as children. So that would add to the power of the fusion. Now, a common misconception in the community is that, Majin Buu, Fat Majin Buu, weakened Buu. So basically, any form of Buu that has Majin Buu, the Fat Buu, is weaker, and that's not the case. In the manga, it was basically stated that Kid Buu was pure evil, and that when Dai Kaioshin was absorbed, he basically gave Majin Buu a soul and made his behavior change. So he was easier for Bibbidi or Bubbidi to control, basically, and that is what happens. It was never outright stated that Fat Buu weakens Kid Buu. Just think about that logically as well, because during the fight on the, in the realm of the Kais, as it's called in the dub, there is no evidence that Kid Buu gets harder to kill when Fat Buu is thrown out of his body. Doesn't make any sense. So basically what I've just told you is a fact there, and that also factors into basically Super Buu with South Kaioshin, Piccolo, Goten, and Trunks are stronger than just Super Buu with South Kaioshin absorbed, and that's the basic reason why I've placed Buuikalo, as the fandom calls it, above, the buff-looking version of Buu with the South Kaioshin absorbed. Let's get on to the next one. Next up, we have Super Buu with the absorption of Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks. Now, in the manga, when base Super Buu is fighting Ultimate Gohan, he is getting completely dominated. He then proceeds to absorb Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks, and it's a complete role reversal. He is then dominating Ultimate Gohan. this is the second strongest form of Majin Buu, and basically he outright states in the manga, he says, "This is my strongest form thus far." That would place him above his first original form of Kid Buu, Fat Buu, Evil Buu, and Base Super Buu. So basically this form is the second strongest form in the manga series, and there's really no one that can rival this form except for Super Vegito. The same with Ultimate Gohan absorbed into Super Buu. So basically this is the second strongest form of Super Buu, and there's really no way to argue that in the manga or even the anime. Now in the anime there is a slight scene where Goku in the English dub says, you know, when he loses the Super Saiyan 3 fusion and he is just Buikalo as the fandom likes to call it, Goku says to him, you know, "I can beat you by myself now." That is a dub line, so anyone in the comment section that wants to bring that up, it's not worth it because it's a dub line. It's not in the Japanese and it's not in the manga, so don't bother bringing that up. The fact of the matter is that it is a dub line, and this is the second strongest form of Majin Buu. So coming in as the strongest form of Majin Buu is obviously Super Buu with Ultimate Gohan absorbed. This took the power and fusion of Goku and Vegeta to surpass this level of power, and we also can't forget that Super Buu with Ultimate Gohan absorbed also had the power of South Kaioshin, Piccolo, Goten, and Trunks, so they would add another level of power on top of that. So this is by far and away the strongest version of Majin Buu. No one can really argue that. The manga or the anime even would have trouble proving otherwise. But guys, that has been today's video. I would love to see your feedback in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? But I have used the manga to basically prove why I believe that these versions of Majin Buu are from weakest to strongest. So leave some feedback down there in the comment section. You may disagree with me, but that's fine. I encourage any feedback in the comment section. As I always say guys, thank you for watching. This has been Super Jayain, and I'll catch you in the next one.